At 1026 North Beckley, in the Oak Cliff section of Dallas, that's the south side of town, there's a very peculiar museum. It's also an absolute must for anyone interested in the JFK assassination. This is the Oswald Rooming House Museum. This is a private residence still owned by the family that owned and operated it as a boarding house when Oswald lived there in November 1963. As my video title indicates, when you go there, you can actually talk to someone who knew Lee Harvey Oswald when he lived there. That's the granddaughter of Gladys Johnson, who owned and rented out the rooms back in '63. Now, that's only if you do the private tour, which is well worth it and underpriced. But you'll see other tours like this swing by while I was talking to Miss Hall, who was 11 when she knew Oswald at this residence. A group out of a bus came in with a guide, snapped a bunch of pictures, and took off. Obviously part of a larger, JFK assassination tour of Dallas. Back to the option I took, you get to talk to Miss Hall about, well, just about anything related to the assassination, the house, what she remembers about all that, but also what her mother and grandmother thought and remembered. And what's more, if you get into this with her, how this affected their family. I mean, imagine all of a sudden the people that descended upon that house, and there was a very hostile environment towards Dallas and anybody with any association to Oswald. The lives of that family, improbably forever tied to the JFK assassination. One thing to get out of the way quickly is this is not where Lee Harvey Oswald and Marina were living when this famous picture was taken. The house on Beckley, which we're looking at today, believe it or not, held up to 18 beds at its height, so Oswald had just one space and was one boarder of many. A single-person residence only, for sure, and this was in Dallas while Marina was living in Irving at the Payne household. Here's the house as it looked back then. It had a separate structure, but Oswald lived right here in the main house. This map is full of false assumptions, stating things as facts, but anyway, in the middle band towards the left, you'll see the spot of this house and how it fits in relation to, all of the major sites from that day, including Oswald's flight. Basically goes from top right to bottom left, ending, of course, at the Texas Theater. So here I am walking up to the house itself. Can't believe it took me this long to do this. I live in the area, not the immediate area, but so glad I took advantage. It hasn't always been a working museum, if you will. So at least there's that. I'm going when you get to see it. In its fully restored condition, and it is fully restored, you are stepping into 1963 when you come into this house. Practically all of the furniture is original. It is really quite a feeling to walk in there. There's Patricia Hall, of course, so she was 11 when she knew Lee Harvey Oswald, her and her brothers. She said her brothers would play with him all the time. In the short time, the span of weeks that he lived there, I think she said 6, he would play with them almost every day. When he would come home from work, meanwhile, all these other single men living there would just ignored the kids. The kids were there a lot because this was their grandmother's home and business, and they would wait there after school until their mom freed up from work. Regarding the mom, the Dallas Morning News says the following. She had, quote, reputation as an Oak Cliff artist known for her work in photographic restoration. And you can see pictures taken by the mother of the family on the wall, so they look professional. Interesting that we're actually talking about 3 generations of female entrepreneurs, right? Patricia Hall running the house as a museum today. Her mother was an artist, had her own studio in Oak Cliff, and the grandmother not only ran this house, but had diners as well in the city. To the right of the family photos, you will see Oswald's room. As you'll see, it's like a converted walk-in closet or something. Meanwhile, I took this picture by just kind of turning around from my previous vantage point. So he really, when I was taking pictures of Miss Hall from facing the front of the house, so he basically lived in the living room of the main house, which served as the common area for the many renters. So it's not like he could slip in and out unobtrusively at all. The room did have doors that are no longer present, by the way. Patricia says Oswald at one point was offered a larger room outside of this main building where he would have been able to slip in and out, and he actually turned it down, so thought that was noteworthy. Here I am in the main room holding the exact same telephone Oswald used to call Marina with. Like I said, so many of the things in the house are original. There's a much more hands-on, intimate feel to what you get to experience here than with the typical museum around, a colossal event. Now we have to take a significant detour from our main purpose. This document, and I'll show it to you up close, appears to be the original death certificate for President Kennedy. And Miss Hall found it in her grandmother's possessions only semi-recently and has no idea how it came to be. Is it authentic? It looks like it. Who knows? Maybe it was some kind of authentic certified copy. How would it have come into the possession of someone in this house? Doesn't make much sense, but things get misplaced. What's interesting here is you can rewind on this and you'll see kind of mistakes, misspellings, things like that. And what she said was then the official one was actually corrected, and maybe that's why this one here got discarded. You might have noticed occupation listed as President of the United States government, so kind of a surreal thing to look at. It definitely looks authentically old. I don't know about its provenance. But she let me take an up-close look, so I was definitely going to show it to you. Here I am sitting on Oswald's actual bed. Not the same mattress I was told, but yes, the same bed. And this is at least half the room that you're looking at here. I mean, it's just a shoebox. There's Gladys Johnson herself and I think it was a CBS News reporter on the right, obviously in the same spot. And turning around from this spot, there's basically one dresser and a really small piece of furniture. Here's the dresser itself, well worn because it's the real thing. It probably did not take the police very long to rifle through this room and make sure they, left no stone unturned. On the left is a printout of everything found by the police, which wasn't much, when they did search the room. On the right is a recreation of Oswald's famous jacket. Of course, we know it's a fact he did come back to the house in the wake of the assassination, picked up that jacket and possibly his revolver, although that's, point of contention. In a published article, the family says they would have known if there was a handgun in that room. Tenants were evicted for having so much as a small bottle of booze in their room. Not a big deal overall, but the cleaning ladies would come in here regularly and, put things in the drawers, etc., and there's only so many spaces. Regardless, let's now get to Patricia's story. When she told it to me, she's been interviewed many times. Like she said, she's already all over YouTube. But I asked her if anyone had ever recorded this one specific story, and she said no. And that's not just YouTubers, but even the many authors that have written books on the assassination have never captured this story. Well, I thought that was such a shame. This really should be saved for posterity. Let me set her up a little bit. Remember, the grandmother, the mother, and the kids all knew Lee Harvey Oswald from his time at the house. Well, the adults, of course, find out about the assassination and about the fact that Lee Harvey Oswald, a man they know, is the accused assassin. But the 3 children don't know any of this. Oh, well, thanks very much for giving me the story. We were talking about the house and the history and your family's interactions with Lee Harvey Oswald. It's all really amazing. But the thing that stood out to me the most was, and I know it's very sad, but you told me about how you and your brothers didn't know about the assassination of the president until you saw Jack Ruby murder Oswald, whom you knew from living here. Is that right?
That's correct.
Oh my goodness.
The day of the assassination, my mother came to the school, picked us up, and took us to our family home. And she did this because she had just seen Mr. Lee arrested at the Texas Theater because her photography studio happened to be across the street. And so she came to the school, took us to our family home, went around and unplugged all the TVs.
Huh.
Hal and I,
Your brother?
thinking, knowing that cartoons would soon be on, we looked at her and said, "Mama, we saw you unplug the TVs," because she had told us that they were broke. And so she got on what we called her forklift, which meant that the back straightened, the shoulders came down, and she looked at us and went, "I said they're broke." So we looked at each other and said, "Mom's gone crazy, let's go play." She didn't let us watch TV on Friday night, Saturday, or Saturday night.
So you had no idea through the weekend?
No idea what all's been going on. By Sunday, the news media had died down. You could watch shows, and they might break in with a news story. We were sitting there watching TV. They break in with the transfer of Lee from city jail to county jail. Detective Lavelle escorts him out. Jack Ruby steps forward and shoots him. My brothers, they just go crazy. They just start hollering, "That's Mr. Lee, that's Mr. Lee. Why did they shoot Mr. Lee?" Mother jumps up, turns off the TV. It's broke again, and has to sit down with an 11, 10, and 6-year-old and explain what he is accused of, what's been going on over here at my grandmother's house, and why we just saw our friend killed on TV.
Oh, and they knew him, and as did you, as the person you would play with here at this house.
Yes.
On a daily basis.
Yes, Mr. Lee was the only roomer that ever played with my brothers.
Oh, so sad.
And they absolutely adored him.
Goodness.
They loved him dearly.
Oh, well, thank you very much for sharing that.
You bet.
And there it is, just, some more sadness out of a very tragic event. I was telling somebody just today how the assassination kind of propagated these waves after waves of sadness. And here's just one more example, an overlooked example. Children seeing these images, regardless of whether or not Oswald was part of a plan or the actual assassin, none of that meant anything to them. How do you try to make any of that make sense to your children or grandchildren? Well, the family, as you can imagine, was not happy about, the association they now had to a presumed presidential assassin. You can imagine worrying about if people thought you were in league with whatever conspiracy happened, or you somehow knew what the lone gunman was going to do. I mean, you name it. The adults wouldn't talk about it. The kids weren't allowed to talk about it. Like I said, this room was restored. For a long time, it was not in this condition. Here is the other side of the room, by the way, obviously when you turn around from the bed. But anyway, anyone who loves history should be glad that the family is now kind of embracing the role this house played in U.S. history and sharing these stories. Stories have to be shared and saved or they're gone, and once they're gone, there's no getting them back. Well, thank you for watching, and thank you very much to Patricia Hall for letting me tape that vignette from the Oswald Rooming House Museum, Dallas, Texas.